Support for The Kyle Hyman Show comes from Notre Dame Federal Credit Union and listeners like you who donate to Redeemer Radio, your local Catholic radio station.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Kyle Hyman.
All right, welcome to a very special episode of the Kyle Hyman Show. We're going to do things a little bit differently today. I am Kyle Hyman, but I'm here with 4 special guests, and we're going to talk a little bit about work-life balance and just have a conversation. I like this idea of not necessarily providing solutions or answers to life's problems, but to have a discussion about them and talk about some of the struggles that there are. So maybe to begin with, if we could just go around the room and everybody introduce themselves, to say maybe name, family status, like where you are with marital and children, and why you're Catholic.
I'll start. I'm Brendan. I have been married for 2 years, and I have one child. She is about 4 months old about now, and so far, so good.
All right.
I'm Catholic because it's very hard to find somewhere to be good, and I think Catholicism is one of those places where you can live a life you're proud of.
Interesting.
My name's Chris. I have been married for some number of years. 2015, what is 2018? 3.5. 3.5 years. I was married on Pi Day. I'm very proud of that.
You never know he was the numbers guy.
Yep. And I didn't even realize that until my sister-in-law pointed it out, but I am married on Pi Day. And we have one child. He's going to be 2 very soon here, and another on the way in a couple months.
Why are you Catholic?
Why am I Catholic? Well, I'm a convert. So when I was converting, I said I wanted to be Catholic for the truth. So I'll stick with that for now, but there are gobs and gobs of reasons why I'm Catholic.
My name is Miles Edens, and I am a married man. I've been married for 2 years, 2.5 years now. Got married on a palindrome, 61016, which my wife was happy about because it means I have no excuse not to remember it. We've got one beautiful baby boy who is 8 months old, and the reason that I'm Catholic is I'm kind of a revert to the faith. My dad passed away when I was 10, and that's when we started going to church and drifted away in my teen years, only to come back in my early 20s. Yes, because of the truth, and because Catholicism gave answers to hard questions and didn't shy away from having a logical basis for it, but also because of an encounter with somebody who is like a brother to me, who loved like Christ. So it was that kind of dual facet of logic and charity that were inextricably linked, that said, okay, this has got difficult answers to questions, but that are necessary and that ring true and leave me fulfilled.
Yeah.
And I'm Chris. I'm going to copy a little bit of Brendan's script. I've been married for 2 years. My daughter is 4 months old now. I'm Catholic really by choice, born into the faith, but kind of copied the script too, that by truth, continue to decide to be Catholic. And it really is, it's the truth. It's there's something about being Catholic that really speaks to the heart and continues to draw you in closer. So, yeah.
Weren't you in seminary?
Yes.
I was in seminary for 4 years.
Got to drop that one out.
Yeah.
I was going to mention that.
I was in seminary for 4 years, so that's definitely a big part of my faith life. As far as the foundation and the understanding of the faith, that was really formative for me. So, yeah.
So what was the process of discerning out of the seminary?
Well,
It's not a loaded
so I can. I was in the seminary for 3 years, made it through college, graduated with a degree in philosophy, went on to major seminary, 1 year of theology, and it was really just kind of being able to step back at that time at the end of first theology and kind of see that this was just not how God wanted me to love. And it's kind of as simple as that, but of course there's a lot of nuances to everyone's story that kind of comes forth. But I am called to be married, it was really easy to leave in that way because it was so clear at that time after 4 years. And part of it, too, is I don't regret 1 minute of being in the seminary. So it would always be a really quick plug for anyone who's discerning the seminary to don't worry, like God will leave you and will not leave you. God will lead you to where you're supposed to be. Whether it's after a year, for whatever reason, sometimes God calls those in for a year or 2 or 3 or 4, and then is able to lead you to your vocation. So yeah.
And Chris, you mentioned that you are Catholic because of the truth, and you also said there were gobs of reasons. So can you give us a couple of those? What are some of the maybe the truthiest reasons to be Catholic?
So I would say early on in my journey, I was a Protestant, non-denominational, evangelical, Protestant, whatever you want to call it. And actually, so Bert and I were roommates randomly when we went to Ball State. It was
you just went potluck, and that's what they assigned you.
We
Okay.
had potluck. And so the person who was assigned my random roommate wound up becoming my best man at my wedding. And he was Catholic. I was Protestant. And for the first year, I'd say we just kind of went our separate ways. But eventually he just kept loving me in a Catholic way. And I kept doing nothing until...
You asked questions, and it's not really fair to say you did nothing.
Well, but the turning point was he gave me a book. It was called A Refutation of Moral Relativism by Peter Kreeft. And that really started my journey because I read the book and I loved how philosophical it was. And I'd never thought of the world through that lens. And then there was a talk by Chris Stefanik, who also goes over moral relativism. And I mean, Peter Kreeft is Catholic, but when you couple Chris Stefanik's Catholicism and his explanation of moral relativism, and you see that moral absolutism is consistent with the Catholic faith, and it kind of all started falling in place after that. So it's like, oh, well, moral relativism is bad. What's good? Moral absolutism. Well, who's the champion of moral absolutism in the world? It's the Catholic Church. You know, as the Church itself says, other faiths have a semblance of the truth, but you know, it's Jesus and His Church that really epitomizes that philosophy.
Yeah.
You know, having answers to really difficult questions is a huge part of the truth that matters, you know.
Well, to continue this conversation, I want to kind of shift into you all being new parents, new husbands, what your faith journey has done in the light of an expanding family. So we'll talk about that here in kind of our different format this morning of a kind of a roundtable discussion here, right here on the Kyle Hyman Show on Redeemer Radio. This is Kyle Hyman, and we're here with Brendan, Chris, Miles, and Chris, four working guys that have fairly new families. So all four of you recently married, recently having children, and so I think those two things are such big transitions in life that a lot of things change. A lot of things about our life change. And our faith is one of those things that sometimes things are more difficult and some things are easier with our faith as our family grows. So I'd kind of like to hear your thoughts on how things have changed once you got married, and maybe you thought like, oh, I didn't realize it was going to be hard to find a time to pray or whatever. And then compound that with having kids. So what's your experience been?
Okay, well, I'll go first, I guess.
Age before beauty.
Thanks, appreciate that. He's saying that because of the beard. You know, it's funny. I experienced this especially with, having my son, but it applied to marriage as well. You become so aware just of how much a schmuck you are. I don't know how else to put it. Like, I just become very aware of all of my rough edges.
Yeah.
And the process of getting those smoothed off is extremely uncomfortable, but you got to stick with it.
You're nowhere near done.
No. My wife tells me that often.
I'm getting pretty close, but
you know what?
I was married like a year before you
right,
were.
you've got a head start on me. I just aspire to to the realm of perfection that you've attained.
The polish.
There you go. Yes, he is polished. Yes, look at that baby face of his. Couldn't grow a beard if he wanted.
I can't grow a beard. That's true.
Finding prayer time as a married couple was not all that difficult because we would in fact take personal prayer time together usually.
Okay.
That would change a little bit when I worked retail because my schedule would change.
Meaning, like, you go off and with a cup of coffee and do your prayer while your wife does her prayer.
Yeah,
Or
often. And
that you would actually be praying together.
Both. Okay. So there'd be, because it's necessary to, I think, get away as Christ did. Go away off to the mountain, right, and pray on his own. But then he also prayed with the apostles. We can't be islands. Part of communion is to have community, and so it's intentional. It's necessary for us to have intentional prayer time where it's just us and Christ. But then also, it's my vocation, for crying out loud. You know what I mean? Like, if we're on an adventure together towards heaven, then we've got to be praying together and praying for each other and praying with each other and finding out each other's intentions. And it's good for us to know, like, where we're at spiritually, mentally, physically, emotionally, all
So
that.
what does that look like, your prayer together as a couple?
It's been different now since Caden came along.
Exactly.
Which has been the interesting thing. Now sometimes it's like, oh, we got 5 minutes, so half of it's intentions. But it's interesting because we get to share by our intentions where we are emotionally and spiritually as well. And we usually take 5 to 10 minutes, hopefully with coffee, to be grateful. We definitely have gratitude, ask for intentions, and then just kind of a reaffirmation that we want to be able to hear and accept what God's will is for us in the day, rather than just pray for an easy day or something like that, even though half the time that's really what I want. It's like, Lord, just give me an easy day, right? Yeah. But it turns into, no, your will be done, not mine. Give me the grace to say yes to your grace. And then close with Hail Mary, and we've got some saints that we feel have been patrons of ours. We ask for their intercession. So that's like the short form prayer that we do. It's not often that we get to, usually when I have a day off with her and Caden's down for a nap, we'll take a half hour and kind of maybe do some Lectio Divina or something like that. But
So going from single to married wasn't a huge transition, other than realizing some of your areas for improvement.
Which
But
are many,
then,
yes.
Once baby comes in, now your schedule's all messed up.
Yeah. And I became even more aware of all of my... I got a different angle to it, like, oh, this is how I need to improve in patience, etc. But so the time that you have is cut down even smaller,
right?
And then you have to just be even more intentional about fitting in your prayer time, because it's easy to let it slide. It's easy to just like forget. So that's the benefit of having a helpmate, is to keep it focused.
And do you think it has? Has your prayer time, maybe quality would be a different thing, but quantity
been reduced
of prayer gone down?
Oh, absolutely.
A child.
Quantity of formal prayer, yeah, absolutely. The challenge then is for me to be praying throughout the day, like have that almost informal conversation with Christ to make up for it, I suppose, or to continue to live in that grace. But yeah, absolutely, the sheer amount of time has been cut down.
So some of us will use an excuse, and maybe your time, Chris, as a seminarian, you could see an even more drastic difference from when I was in the seminary. We did this much prayer, and then now, as a married person with a kid, I'm lucky if I can get a Hail Mary in or something like that. And I know myself, I'll kind of use that as an excuse, as, well, I'm married. I don't have that kind of time to pray. And I've even had people justify that as, you living out your vocation is your prayer, which I think there's definitely some truth to that. But sometimes I think we can use that as a crutch, if you will, and say like, I didn't get any prayer today, but I lived my vocation or something like that.
That is
going from seminary to married
because
life.
Seminary and married life are very different, to say the least. I don't know.
I am shocked.
Do tell.
Seminary and because there's in so many ways there's so much different to where. But it's so good. Like, marriage is so good, and it's really the same because it's all giving of self, and I think that's part that has to continue to ring true. That how all vocations are the same it's really giving of yourself, and they're the same because you're kind of looking at the same end goal, in a way of saying, not necessarily goal in some ways, but you're looking at the same person. But when you're looking through marriage, you're kind of looking in the eyes of your spouse for Christ. So that's something that has to continue to ring true, is that you're living for the truth. You're living to give of yourself, and that can come in a lot of different forms, especially in early fatherhood. The giving of self looks much different than before you have a child, or through the months of pregnancy of wife. The giving all looks a lot different. So, but I think that's the way that they're pretty similar, is that as a seminarian, you have to give of yourself. As a husband and a father, you have to really give of yourself. But the holy hours that were once there, they still, the prayer time still needs to be there, obviously, as a father, but it looks a lot different. So, yeah.
Now, none of your kids are old enough to. Wait, Chris, did you have 3? 2. 2. Because that's a whole nother dimension, is when you're trying to pray with kids. So I've got 4 kids. The oldest is 8, and yeah, sometimes prayer time, there's more yelling and fighting and anger. Myself having anger than any other time of the day. Like, I'm supposed to be praying, but I just want to.
You just want them to do it right. Yeah. My idea of right is the most right. Sit down.
Yeah. So how about Brendan and Chris? What's your experience been in that transition and trying to still make prayer priority?
You first, Brendan. You first.
Me first. Prayer has been a priority since high school for me. So I've done a daily rosary since then, never missed a day.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm not.
Here's your ribbon.
I'm not saying that to kind of build myself up or boast. I'm just saying that that was something that was really important to me, especially going into marriage. And I told my wife, I'm going to keep praying this every day. And for a while there, she and I were doing that. We'd start a decade, and then we go off to work, and I'd finish the rosary and she'd finish the rosary, but we'd start the day with a decade. Since having Catherine has been a little different. My prayer life has consisted a lot of enjoying my daughter and enjoying my wife. And so I'm not trying to use marriage as a crutch, but I think the quality of my prayer has improved greatly. Because now all of a sudden I'm not just praying for myself or for my wife or even my future. I'm praying for my kid's future, and that seems to make things so much clearer. Especially as a father, it's like, wow,
the responsibility is there.
Yeah,
right. Yeah,
I think that's a really humbling part of becoming a father. Is it's like that first time. I think everybody goes through that surreal moment when you're like, there's a child in the back of the van, or whatever you're driving, SUV, maybe pickup truck. Probably not from those. Right. You shouldn't put your child in the back of a pickup truck. Not a good idea.
Not endorsing pickup truck. Not endorsing.
Children.
Yeah,
they wouldn't know any different though.
But it really, yeah, they wouldn't know any different, but the police will, that won't hold up in court. So, but it really is like that responsibility to where they're like, oh my gosh, you talk about having a child, and of course it's real during pregnancy, but good grief, when they're in the back of the van, it's there's the responsibility is like, oh my gosh, I have to care for this other person,
and spiritually, like
yeah.
When you're praying, Bren, has that hit you yet? Like, of the whole, what legacy am I gonna leave for my daughter to follow?
Yeah, that hits a lot. Most of the time, it's kind of please make me do well, or help me to do well, so that I have enough for her, so that I can provide for her and for my wife. It's not so much glory for me; it's glory for my kids and my future children that I will have. It's that legacy is a good way to describe it. And there's definitely a part of that that's coming from prayer, but there's also a part of that's coming from living with the baby and letting the baby's crying and that suffering that you have to go through as a dad, where you may not be able to help the baby since the baby wants mom. That's something that kind of galvanizes you to being Christ, especially as the head of household, where you have to take responsibility and understand that you're not going to be the most important person anymore.
Yeah, I'd definitely just add what all these gentlemen have said. I think your prayer definitely changes when you both get married and have children. It becomes less about you praying for you and more about you praying to be a better you for them. That is what I've seen the biggest shift of. Is I don't say, oh Lord, help me to be virtuous. I say, Lord, help me to be virtuous because they deserve that.
Yeah,
Help me to be worthy.
And I don't deserve them, but they deserve the best. They deserve Jesus, really. And I'm not Jesus. But I
You're
wish I
close,
could
but-
be, Well, thanks, Miles.
And I
That
think
polish,
that's where it has to be a daily struggle. It needs to be a struggle as opposed to, the culture of apathy that, it's okay. You can kind of just sign your name off. And that's something, you talk about the daily examination of conscience. You got to get to the point where it shouldn't be that one day you wake up 5 years from now and you kind of see where you are, as opposed to each day you're kind of fighting in a sense for virtue in your own soul that I can't get up tomorrow and run a marathon. I could. I would definitely die. But you have to, it's couched to 5K, however you want to say it, that there's and I think that's part of fatherhood and marriage that I've seen too, is that it's not a sprint. Sometimes it does feel like it. The diapers are gone and you have to get to the store, or it's going to be a disaster, absolute disaster. So sometimes
Where's
you do
all
have
my
to sprint.
t-shirts?
Yeah. The toilet paper doesn't work yet. Oh, geez. Okay, too much. Probably too much. But the point kind of remains is that it really is. It's it takes time, and you kind of have to be patient with yourself on it, to where it's like, it's kind of a jerk today, so we'll get better next time, hopefully. So,
Definitely got to give the best of your life, and
Yeah.
you have to question that every night before you go to bed. Have I given the best of my life to my family? And if you haven't, you got to fix it for the next day. If you don't do that, you're never going to learn how to do it better.
Yeah. All right, we've been talking about family life with 4 fairly recent married and recent dads. Coming up, I want to talk about work-life balance and faith and the workplace and how you guys are able to manage that, and also eventually get into this idea of kind of comparing ourselves to other people at work. So all that's coming up on this special episode, this roundtable discussion, right here on the Kyle Hyman Show on Redeemer Radio. This is Kyle Hyman, and joining us today for our special kind of roundtable discussion here is Brendan Price, Chris Sipes, Miles Edens, and Chris Sindelar. And I want to talk about faith in the workplace. We've been talking about family life and how our prayer life and faith kind of changes as our family changes. But I want to talk a little bit. You guys are all in secular work environments. A lot of the people that we have on the show are Catholic authors or people that work in ministry. And so I'm kind of curious your guys' take on faith in the workplace. And maybe before we get into that, you could repeat your names and also give a little context of the type of environment that you work.
I'm Brendan, and I'm a corporate accountant, so I know it's very thrilling work. Most people would, come up to me and ask me, "How do you do it all day?" And I just gotta tell them.
It's my
Most of the
superpower.
time, it's my superpower. Most of the time, it's I get started on telling people what I do, and they just kind of fall asleep. So I'll just leave it as is. Corporation.
So if accounting puts you to sleep, wait till you hear what I do. My name's Chris, and I'm an actuary,
Yes.
Which means he does a lot of math.
among other things. Funny enough, Brendan and I work for the same company.
I joined the dark side.
Now we go to lunch every day together.
Very nice.
I work in a retail sector, so I work for a retail corporation here in town. I've been working retail for the last few years, last 5 years, in fact. This is Miles, by the way. And so I don't get to take the hour lunches where, I get to go out leisurely with my best friend and
Sometimes 2 hours.
Sometimes 2 hours. Oh,
Look at that.
yeah.
Somebody's
So-
going to listen to this.
Right.
They're going to know. that
20 minutes.
on you.
20 minutes. Just
yeah,
20.
minutes max.
Exactly.
I actually usually eat
But
at my
you're only
desk.
talking about work. You're only talking about work.
Sorry, bosses. I eat at my desk. I've never left work ever. I live there.
Let's have a granola bar.
yeah.
While I'm out on the
calories.
floor. So we get the 30-minute lunch, right? But it's great because I work in the operations manager there, and so focus from customer service to making sure that operations are going on behind the scenes.
And I'm the other Chris, as Brendan will affectionately say. No, not really, but I work with children with autism. So that's been doing that for about 4 years. Really kind of how I fell into it. When I left the seminary, I did have a degree in philosophy. Not to discourage anyone, but there's not much you can do with that directly. It's again, I'm not discouraging it. The liberal arts are great, but so naturally I substitute taught, and from there I found myself in a special education classroom, and just kind of fell in love with being able to serve that population. Really. Found my way into applied behavioral analysis, which is what I do now.
He makes up for our corporate greed.
Yeah.
So, what are some of the ways that your faith actually plays a role in the workplace, and you're actually able to bring your faith into it? And then maybe what are some of the struggles with trying to live out your faith in the workplace?
I personally think one of the biggest struggles is in a secular corporation, especially a Fortune 500 company, there are prescribed behaviors that are not so heavily implied as they are required. Yeah. It's frustrating, when you do these trainings, which are clearly biased or suggestive of how you're supposed to think, and that they're kind of there, but they're not all the way there to the truth. And where they lack is not where you want to be, but you feel like you have to do it. And that's where I would just start right away. It's just getting that balance of how much do I listen to what I'm told I'm supposed to do because it's going to help my career. And again, like we were saying with prayer, not for my sake, but for my family's, my career is better. That means technically their lives are better usually. But versus, where do I draw that line of I'm not going to do that, or I'm just going to keep my mouth shut?
Yeah. Can you give an example of an issue or a topic that
homosexuality is a big one.
Yeah, we just had a training regarding that, and there's nothing wrong with accepting people.
Sure.
That's it's a shame in some ways that they have to include that on the training. You should accept homosexuals. Well, of course you should. But I think the issue is not so much the discrimination, it's that we should be for it.
Acceptance or tolerance used to mean one thing, now it means something else.
like an endorsement of the lifestyle?
It's a polarizing topic. And obviously, it's going to be wherever you go, but especially in the corporate world, it's kind of, if you're not for this, then you are against it. Mm-hmm. And if you are against it, we don't want you to work here.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a fine line you have to walk as a Catholic in a big company.
I don't work in the corporate world necessarily. I am a hiring manager, and I don't look at those surface factors. It depends on work experience, etc. But regardless, the company still has certain. You have to be tolerant of people.
Sure.
Right. And we certainly want that to be the case. And oftentimes I find myself, especially in a position of higher management for my location, I am blessed to work with people who give me the benefit of the doubt and know that I speak from a place of charity. But often I find it better if I simply love them by my actions, by treating them with respect and dignity, even if they don't treat themselves with respect and dignity, or if I feel that their actions are not respectful or dignified. It is not helpful, I think, in cases like that, to bring up a Catholic point of view necessarily, if it's going to turn them away. if you know them well enough to know that by mentioning this or that aspect of the church and saying, but it's because Christ loves you, if they're not in a position to be able to accept that, then you've done more harm than good. You know what I mean? I would much rather in those cases have it eventually come out that Miles is Catholic. Oh, okay. But as a result of I've never once felt disrespected by him or made to feel less.
Yeah.
I was in a meeting and one of our high leaders said, we're so excited, we're going to start targeting those who have undergone like sex changes and things of that nature. And I asked the question, I said, well, do you know how that's going to impact your assumption on mortality when someone who was a male and then wants a policy as a female, but really they probably still have a lot of underlying male genetics? And I was like, well, have you thought about how that's going to affect our business? No. You should probably do that, right?
All right. Well, the other aspect I think that is, I'm really curious to hear your thoughts on is the difference between people like yourself who are married and have kids, and then kind of the competitive nature of the business world, where you might be in an environment where somebody either just isn't married, so they're single, and so they're more available, they don't have kids, they don't have those responsibilities, or have chosen to not have kids. And then that comparison that can happen within the workplace. So we'll talk about that here with our guys here for our roundtable special edition of the Kyle Hyman Show right here on Redeemer Radio. This is Kyle Hyman, and joining me this morning for our special roundtable discussion, we've got 4 guys here, married with children: Brendan Price, Chris Sipes, Miles Edens, and Chris Sindelar. Thanks for being here, guys.
Oh, thanks for having us.
Thank you.
We've been talking about the workplace and trying to live out your faith in the workplace. And I know one of the things that kind of comes up, and I find myself doing this, I start comparing myself to other people that are in my industry, whether when I was doing kind of Catholic speaking things, you'd be like, oh, well, he's doing so many more gigs than me. And then I realized, oh, he has a stay-at-home wife, and my wife works. So I have to be home to balance this. Or now in the radio, just kind of seeing different people in different radio positions that they're able to do so many different things. They can travel more. They can, I've made my family a priority. And so I can't expect to have the same opportunities, maybe, or in the same dedication to my craft as some other people that either don't have families by choice or by force, by nature. So what has your experience been in the workplace of that kind of balance of family and work?
Yeah, I think that comparison can be a big poison. It really can be, because no matter what, whatever position you're in, somebody's going to be doing better than you in some way.
Yeah.
So that's where it gets so tricky, because you can always look and someone's always going to be faster or stronger or taller or shorter if you're trying to be shorter for some reason. I don't know why, but
Good job, Chris.
But yeah. You gotta look out for the short guys. Not that I'm defining
Chris.
it or anything like that.
We were just talking about yesterday with that one football player. You were like,
Yeah. If you're 5'9", then that means a lot of particular things. I don't know what really, but it's something to think about. But it really is that compare can lead to despair. So it's something.
Ooh,
yeah,
cliches. I like that.
Yeah. I mean, it's a cliche for a reason, right?
And it's catchy. You're not going to forget it.
Yeah.
Can I get that on your
everything.
business card?
That's That's
Johnny
a
Cochran.
It's a family.
That was a great joke. I like that.
So it is. Comparison can be a great evil because. And this is part of, wherever we work, there can be a sense of competition. And the idea can be that competition is something that's really good, but you kind of look at who you're competing against. Especially if you're competing against someone within your same job, that becomes really dangerous because ultimately what that kind of leads to is, I hope this other person fails. And that's really dangerous. For my career specifically, I'm working to, a lot of things, but generally help children with autism. So I don't want anyone in my business to fail. I need all of them to be as successful as possible.
It's better for the whole world.
It's better for the whole world. Yeah, exactly. So, and I think it kind of gets at this point of using people as means and not ends. That's really crucial, because there can be this idea of networking that, well, I'll know all these people. They'll put me in connection with this person and that person, and then I'm going to be successful. So there's part of that you can kind of baptize it in a sense that I want to be able to help other people. If I get to know other people, I'll be able to help more people. But part of it can be that I'm going to meet a bunch of people, and they end up being stairs for you to climb on top of, and that's not good. Stairs aren't people.
I feel like we need to just have business cards made with this statements on it, each with a sentence.
Compared leads to despair.
Just dropping one-liners out.
Stairs aren't people.
Stairs aren't people.
You are very right.
So you have to kind of look at those things because it's what is the dignity and worth of people. If you say that people are only good and as far as you can use them, then man,
very relative statement.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Because
relative
then
to the value that you have for the use you can get. Out
yeah,
of it.
yeah. Because and then who's to say who's useful and who's not?
Yeah.
And this is kind of getting the college culture to where it's like, what are you doing on Friday? Oh, I don't know. We'll see what comes up. And it's like, translation, I'm waiting for something better, someone who I can enjoy more to come up.
That's a very sanguine mentality.
Yeah,
that
exactly.
Sanguine temperaments.
And then you go through all of college and no one's your friend, as some of us here have experienced. I'm not going to say who.
He's just looking at Brendan.
I'm not looking at Brendan.
No,
I'm looking.
have
There's
lots
a
of
mirror
friends.
over there. Yeah. Brendan has lots of friends. I'm saying that,
Not anymore, but I used to.
I thought after high school I'd make some friends, but
You had to let them all go.
Speaking in a retail position where we've got, we're one part of a district, right? And so you have other stores and you're looking at each other's P&L and seeing how you compare.
Right.
P&L stands for profit and loss, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, actuary, or whatever your name is. It can be very, very difficult not to get into a point of view where you're hoping for another store, not only for yourself to do better than them, but in some cases where they failed, in order to avoid getting the ire of your district manager or whatever new ruling or marketing decision that corporate has made, the sales aspect, like we're going to merchandise this in this store. These are the new metrics we're going to figure out. Email capture is a really big thing right now. So comparing email capture, and then because the GMs know each other, it becomes a case of who's trained their store more poorly, right? X, Y, or Z does a terrible job, and then because it's in this impersonal relationship that you don't hardly ever see them, when you're supposed to be part of a team lifting up the district.
Think of car salesmen to where sometimes car salesmen have a really bad, they're sly and they're slippery. But there's stories of car salesmen who are just really good guys.
Sure.
And they really want to be able to provide someone with a service, really, of getting a better car. Mm-hmm. And that can be, you can serve Christ in that way.
You got to be authentic. And if you authentically love people can tell. But just
exactly,
sorry, not to rugby the ball back from you real quick. Just speaking from a Catholic perspective, it comes down to a matter of pride. The secular business world really rewards pride, taking not just a gladness from your work, but a pride in it that defines you. You build yourself on it, and you're willing to do whatever it takes in order to take the next step. Well, as Catholics, as Christians, we're not willing to do whatever it takes to take the next step because we got our eyes on the ultimate goal, which is heaven. Yeah. Like I'm going to be like the mortality rate at your insurance company is 100% for everyone because there's nobody who's not going to die.
Is that true? Do the numbers prove that?
At Omega, it should be the end of the mortality table.
Right, exactly.
Omega, it's 100%.
100%. Everybody's going to die.
Is it? I don't know.
How am I composing and carrying myself now, right? And what does that say? Does that invite conversation about what kind of joy I have? And I'm not saying that I do it particularly well. I often struggle with it, but that's the goal.
I think Miles brought up a good point. That sacrifice, maybe that's how you should measure success. And the Catholic Church provides a lot of good guidance on comparing yourself, even if it's implicit. It's not something that's stated. For Catholics, in the workplace, you should never sacrifice family or the betterment of your family,
Right.
at least.
So that's my question, because our primary vocation is to, first as men, to our wives,
Right.
and then to our children, and then eventually somewhere down the road to our job.
Right.
But so often, depending on the job that you're working in, you could work more hours, make more money, maybe get a promotion, which is going to say like, hey, look, if you take this job, yeah, there'll be some more responsibilities. You might have to work some weekends and stuff like that, but it'll pay better. Or if your job doesn't offer that opportunity, maybe you have another job opportunity like, hey, I could use some help on the weekends for this. Would you be interested in doing some painting in the summer? Whatever. Like,
Yeah.
there's always an opportunity to work more and make more money, which can be very attractive, but that's taking away from something. So how do you balance that, and maybe where do you draw the line to say, look, I'm doing 40 hours a week and that's it. The rest of my time is for my kids or family, or 60 hours a week? And how do you put those limitations on?
How angry is your wife?
That's what I wanted to say. Is that's the biggest decider of that is what does your wife think? The way I look at my job is I'm not doing my job by myself. My wife is doing it with me. For every hour that I'm at work, that's another hour that she's doing her primary role of basically a single mother during the day.
Right.
So it's a constant discussion, essentially. When are you going to be home? I'm going to be home this time. Is that okay, or is that not okay? It can't just be all about, oh, I know if I work a lot, it will help me in my career.
Right.
But that may not help me in my life.
Which I think a lot of people, they don't realize those are two
mixed
separate
up,
things.
yes.
Yeah.
My life and my career are not the same thing.
And especially if I can cut in here, I think it's really important to look at maybe what is more important to the family, the family unit itself. Yeah, you can go on and work a ton of hours and make a lot of money and be very successful, but if you're never there for your kids' basketball games as a kid looking over and you don't see your dad in the stands cheering you on, and, maybe you're a great baseball player and you just want to see your dad watch you hit a home run. That's really hard to do, and if you're willing to work for all that money, you can say, well, I got my kids everything they want. They can go to free college. And
But is that really providing for
is
your
that really
children?
helpful?
Or is that really what they
Are you
wanted?
really-
Maybe they really wanted you there.
That emotional connection is very important for children, especially, and it was important for me because my dad, he took pay cuts because he was like, let's look at the family. I got 4 kids in high school. I can't just up and move them. That would be terribly detrimental to the family. So he took a pay cut to remain where he was at, and I could never have been more grateful.
That's another thing.
What an example.
Corporate wants you to be willing to be rootless in order to move where the company needs you and have the company be your number one goal. But when your vocation's your family, sorry, I'm going to lay down roots because I want my children to. With roots, you're connected to life. You know what I mean? It's life-giving to focus on that. I work in a position where during 1 or 2 months during the year, I'm working 6 days a week regularly. I get 4 days off a month, and you're working a lot of hours. That right there is pretty much the limit for our family. Anything more than that, we've made it work in retail. I work every other weekend, but those are the times where it becomes a case of needing to look at, is this good for my family, and am I willing to take it to prayer and be willing to face a pay cut if need be in order to have more time? I think that's the biggest struggle has been for us.
I just want to say though, real quick, before we get even further into this, there is the other side of this, which is that you can't be all about spending time with your family because then you're not going to do any work
and
you'll get fired, and that's bad for your family.
That's really bad.
So there's an upper limit or bound, and there's probably a lower bound as well.
The balance
that
of
should
logic
be prayed about.
And that's the thing is that how often am I actually praying about it? Because I've used this logic, which is based on my bank account and how happy my wife is, right? To determine this works for us so far. How often am I taking that to prayer and to Christ and saying, hey, do you like the work I'm doing? is this what you want for me? And sometimes, you're not going to get an answer from, yes, you should change your job and go somewhere. That's not what Jesus sounds like.
I hear that all the time.
Right. But a case of, provided it's not morally detrimental to you, oftentimes the Lord is not going to have input necessarily.
But if you're putting your work week cap at 6 hours, that could be irresponsible as well. Because really, when you look at your vocation, it's in many ways, when you're called to be a father, you're called to provide for your family. Some men can do that being stay-at-home dads. But if you're called to work and provide for your family from a financial standpoint, then that does mean that you're kind of committed to those people too. Right. So you kind of have to have both, and to where you can't be reckless and irresponsible. There's going to be certain times to where, if I called up my work and I said, oh, I'm having a child, and they're like, oh, great, after work, you should be able to see them. That would be a big problem. Thankfully, that's not the case. I don't think for any of us, but it's kind of able to see that it's not worth it. It doesn't matter how much money you're going to give me. I'm not going to miss out on my family because of this.
Yeah,
so.
and
at the end of your life, you're not going to wish that you'd made more money. You'd wish that you'd spent more time with your family.
Yeah,
I like it. Yeah. And on that note, I think that's a great message to leave on today. So thank you so much for joining us, guys, and for having this great discussion about faith in the workplace, faith in the family. It's been great. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
All right, thank you.
Our thanks also to Notre Dame Federal Credit Union for underwriting this show and for their support. We'll be back tomorrow with another episode of The Kyle Hyman Show. Until then, remember to leave room for the Holy Spirit.